In Clement Clarke Moore's famous poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, children dreamt of sugar plums, a term for small round or oval candies made of crystallized sugar. Regardless of what these treats actually were, the children cleverly imagined the delights they hoped to receive for Christmas. As Marty Robbins once sang, "Love cannot be explained, it cannot be controlled. One day it's warm, the next it's cold." For me, growing up as the youngest of 3 boys, love and kindness were often absent in my family. I took after my mother, while my older brothers were much like my father. Though my father never physically hit my mother, his yelling and cutting words often drained the happiness from her face. Following his example, my brothers made my life miserable. I've never understood why my mother stayed with him. Since leaving for college, I only speak to my father and brothers when absolutely necessary. Determined to escape their toxic influence, I've built my life around avoiding emotional and physical harm. Unlike the men in my family who scoff at helping others, I've committed myself to volunteering wherever I can. Through this work, I met the love of my life, and volunteering has also deepened my desire to have children. I am committed to breaking the cycle of violence and ensuring my kids grow up in a loving and supportive family. Ironically, I've come full circle in a strange way. My name is Jeff Foster, and I enjoy playing Santa Claus. What I don't enjoy is people finding out about it. Admittedly, this might be a psychological hang-up, but I'm self-conscious about my appearance. The idea of being labeled the jolly old fat man doesn't sit well with me. Despite my reserved personality, I do have a playful side, and playing Santa helped me meet my wife. At one event, while entertaining children, Cassie was one of Santa's helpers. Though I barely knew her name, her personality intrigued me. After the event, I tried to find her without revealing my Santa identity. Through mutual friends, I finally met her. At first, Cassie wasn't interested in dating, but a double date set up by her friend gave me an opening. I put on my best charm, exaggerating my financial status to impress her. Our relationship grew from there. A second double date led to us going out one-on-one. Cassie wasn't in a rush to settle down, but I was patient. 6 months later, we made things official, and a year after that, we got married. Now, as we near our 30s, starting a family has become a more frequent topic of conversation. While I'm known for being serious, direct, and socially awkward, Cassie is my opposite. At company parties, she thrives, while I usually stay on the sidelines, observing people. After 4 years of marriage, Cassie began subtly suggesting I skip her company events. Ignoring her hints, I attended anyway, noticing who she spent time with and how she acted both in groups and one-on-one. As the holidays approached, I signed up for Santa work through an agency. One assignment caught my attention: a Saturday evening gig at the upscale 5 Seasons Hotel. High-end hotels are my favorite since they typically offer generous tips. I eagerly accepted the job. Later, I realized that the event was hosted by Cassie's employer, Malden Enterprises. Oddly, she hadn't mentioned the party, though it was only 2 weeks away. On the Thursday before the event, I decided to bring it up. "Cassie, let's do dinner and a movie tomorrow night. I've got a project on Saturday that'll keep me busy all day and evening," I said. "Then you'll miss my company's holiday party," she replied. "This is the first I've heard of it. I'm sure I've mentioned it, probably more than once. You just don't listen," she said, her tone laced with false disappointment. "Not that your absence would be a big loss. You're not exactly a party enthusiast?" Though she tried to sound upset, her barely concealed delight didn't escape me. I made a mental note to watch her more closely at the event. On the evening of the party, I arrived in my Santa suit, unnoticed among the crowd. Malden Enterprises CEO, John Malden, was mingling, surrounded by employees and their families. From my vantage point, I observed Cassie laughing with coworkers. Her body language told me she was pretending she had tried hard to get me to attend, though her words to John seemed hollow. Later, I noticed Cassie flirting with Pat Stillman, a salesman from her office. Pat was older, with a wife and kids, or so I'd thought at the summer barbecue. Perhaps his wife had stayed home or they were no longer together. Watching Cassie smile at him and raise her eyebrows made my stomach churn. During one of my breaks, I stepped out of the restroom and hid behind a dark mesh screen. From there, I saw Cassie slow dancing with Pat on the dance floor, her head resting on his shoulder. Then, to my disbelief, I watched her take Pat's hand and move it across her chest, a gesture I knew well from our own intimacy. Anger rising, I snapped photos with my phone from behind the screen and sent one to Cassie. "Take a look at this picture someone sent me. In the next one, maybe it's me beating up this guy. "Isn't that Pat Stillman?" I texted. Either she didn't hear her phone buzz, or it was left somewhere else. Out of curiosity, I called the hotel and asked for Cassie's room. They had no record of her. When I asked for Pat Stillman, they connected me, but no one answered. That's when I sent the photo to John Malden. "Do you encourage married employees to cheat at your parties?" "Strange that Pat has a room booked here," I messaged. Returning to my Santa station, I saw John glance at his phone. His gaze followed mine toward Cassie and Pat. Motioning to the photographer, John gestured discreetly but firmly. I stayed in the background, watching as events unfolded. This night had shattered more than just holiday cheer. It had exposed a truth I could no longer ignore. JN and the photographer exchanged a few quiet words before the photographer resumed taking pictures, focusing on Cassie and Pat. When the second slow dance ended, Cassie and Pat shared a quick kiss on the lips before parting ways. Despite heading in different directions, they somehow ended up seated next to each other at their table. I couldn't help but notice the name cards meticulously placed on every table. Clearly, the seating arrangements were pre-planned. How convenient. It was time for me to return to Santa's throne. As I settled in, I pondered something I've often wondered. Why do so many moms flirt with Santa? What's the appeal? Do they actually think we share much in common with the jolly man in red? Not that I mind a well-placed neckline that ensures I notice. It's hard not to smile and wink in response. As I listened to excited children sharing their Christmas wishes, my attention shifted to Cassie. She was looking at her phone, and her reaction was almost theatrical. She abruptly moved away from Pat, her eyes scanning the room as if trying to identify who might have taken the incriminating photo. When Pat reached out to put his arm around her, she brushed him off with an irritated reprimand. Both of them started surveying the crowd, each looking in opposite directions. During a break between children, I took the opportunity to snap a photo of their frantic search. One looked left, the other right. It was almost comical. I decided to send the picture to Cassie during my next break. Cassie soon disappeared into the hallway, phone in hand, pacing back and forth. She alternated between holding her phone to her ear and staring at it as if sheer willpower would make me answer her calls. Naturally, I let the calls go to voicemail. When the buffet lines opened for dinner, marking my 30-minute break, I used the moment to send Cassie another message. "This looks more like we got caught. Don't bother coming home." Her response was almost immediate. She glanced at her phone and visibly stiffened. With a flick of her fingers, she sent back a reply. "It's not what you think. This is a complete misunderstanding." At least her evening plans had been disrupted, though I doubted I had intercepted their affair before it fully began. If Pat was separated or divorced, I couldn't help but wonder if Cassie had played a role in that. My next task was mingling with the guests, a part of the job I always dreaded. People don't really know how to have a normal conversation with Santa, leaving me feeling more like a clown than a holiday icon. Pat, meanwhile, nervously scanned the crowd, clearly trying to spot who had tipped me off. Cassie stayed on the periphery, avoiding most people until she eventually made her way toward the restrooms. She moved like a cornered animal, uncertain of her next step. Not long after, John Malden approached Pat, engaging him in what appeared to be a brief but pointed conversation. Pat's shoulders slumped as he made his way to the exit, clearly dismissed. Moments later, Cassie reappeared, her face lighting up with a smile as she caught John's attention. But watching that smile vanish as John spoke to her was deeply satisfying. Her expression of fear and panic was almost cathartic. Cassie quickly gathered her belongings and left the party. It was a strange twist of fate. Playing Santa had led me to fall in love with Cassie, but now it left me disgusted by her. After dinner, I returned to the kids for a final session before taking another break. Cassie had left me several voicemails and texts, one of which I responded to. "My informant says you and Pat were sent home. Did you stop by his room again? Maybe you fooled around before the party and after?" Her reply came swiftly. "Jeff, it's not what you think. I didn't do anything. I started feeling unwell, so I left early. I'm home now, alone. When are you coming back?" "I asked you not to come home," I shot back. "I think I'll find a room for the night." "You disgust me." Her pleas continued. "Jeff, don't say that. Come home and let me explain. You'll understand." "There's nothing to understand," I replied. "You wore an outfit I've never seen before, pushed his hand to your chest, and planned a dirty evening together. No wonder you didn't want me at the party. And what about his wife and kids? Oh, they're divorcing? So you're a homewrecker too?" Cassie called again, but I ignored it. Santa's break was over, and I had one last shift to finish. Once my work as Santa was done, I changed out of the suit and sought out John Malden. "Hi, John. Jeff Foster," I said, extending my hand. "Jeff, I sent Cassie home. No, we don't tolerate behavior like this. She and Pat will have a meeting with HR on Monday. But tell me, how did you get that photo?" "You're right, it's not important," I replied. "I'm just glad you're handling it. If we never meet again, know I appreciate your response. Happy holidays." John patted me on the back as I left. Managing a team of misbehaving adults couldn't be easy, especially during the holidays. I turned off my phone and checked into a cheap motel near the highway. Emotionally drained, I took a long shower, and as the reality of my situation sank in, I couldn't hold back tears. I won't say I cried myself to sleep, but I also can't say I didn't. The next morning, I woke at my usual time despite the lack of an alarm. My body knew, even if I didn't want it to. While I dreaded returning home, I knew it was inevitable. Still, I wasn't in a rush. Before calling Cassie, I reached out to the Santa hotline. They needed a last-minute replacement for a children's hospital event due to their scheduled Santa being arrested for drunk driving. I agreed to step in, unaware it would be one of the most fulfilling Santa experiences I'd ever have. At the hospital, the children, though unwell, were genuine and full of hope. Their hugs carried a warmth that was both comforting and heart-wrenching. Parents often embraced me too, expressing gratitude. Even the nurses were unusually kind, a gesture I didn't realize I needed so much until then. During lunch, I met Julie, a nurse about my age. She guided me to the nurses' lounge and joked, "You can use this space if you behave." "I can always tell the naughty from the nice," I replied. "Really? Which list am I on?" she teased. "Definitely nice," I said, earning a disarming smile. We chatted over lunch, and her kindness felt like a balm for my wounded heart. By the time I packed up and left, she walked me to my car. It was the first time in days I felt like I could breathe again. As I sat in my car outside the hospital, I reflected on what had just happened. Julie's warm smile and kind words lingered in my mind. "I hope we meet again, Santa. Or should I call you by your real name? Jeff Foster. It was a pleasure spending the day with you, Jeff. You were incredible with the kids. Children and animals always know when someone is good at heart, and they clearly embraced you." "Take care, sweetheart," she said before turning and heading back into the hospital. I stayed in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, lost in thought. When I finally started the car, the path ahead seemed daunting but clear. Spending time with those children had solidified my determination to ensure my life stayed on track. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed 2 extra cars parked in front of the house. That's when it hit me. I hadn't turned on my phone since heading to the hospital. As the garage door rose, I caught sight of Cassie pulling back the living room curtain. She was standing with her mother, both watching me closely. The greeting was far from welcoming. "Well, look who decided to grace us with his presence," my mother-in-law remarked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. I ignored her. "I was worried about you," Cassie said, her voice trembling. "The little boy had to run away and hide," her brother chimed in mockingly. Only my father-in-law offered something resembling politeness. "Care to explain why you vanished, Jeff?" I took a deep breath before replying. "I assume Cassie gave you her curated version of events. Did she conveniently leave out the part where she's dating someone else? There's a picture of her looking thrilled while her boyfriend gropes her chest at her holiday party." Cassie's mother gasped. "Absolute nonsense! I don't believe it!" "It doesn't matter," I said firmly. "I'm glad you're all here so the truth can't be twisted. I'm divorcing Cassie." "Jeff, no!" Cassie cried, rushing toward me. I raised a hand to stop her. "Let me finish. I've always wanted kids, but I've realized having them with Cassie would be a terrible mistake. I grew up in a household full of cruelty and disrespect, and last night, Cassie showed me exactly who she is. I won't risk becoming a weekend dad." Cassie tried to hug me, but I stepped behind the kitchen table, using it as a barrier. "Just a month ago, we celebrated our 5th anniversary and talked about starting a family. Now I find out she has a boyfriend. Did you tell your family that the owner of your company sent you home from the party for inappropriate behavior? Did you, Cassie?" The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. "That's what I thought," I continued. "I wonder if you'll even have a job on Monday. And as for your current boyfriend, Pat Stillman, right? He's supposedly divorcing his wife. Or maybe he just said that to get you into bed." "He's not my boyfriend," Cassie yelled. "We never slept together." "Then what was it, Cassie? Did you ask him to fondle your chest?" Cassie fled the room, and everyone else suddenly found something very interesting to stare at other than me. "Maybe counseling could help," my father-in-law offered hesitantly. "Sir, with all due respect, I want kids. but I'm not risking their future with someone like Cassie. Counseling won't change that. As I walked to the bedroom, I heard hushed arguments behind me. The bathroom door was shut, and I assumed Cassie had locked herself inside. 10 minutes later, I was driving out of the garage. By Wednesday, Cassie had been served divorce papers at Malden Enterprises. I learned this through a barrage of angry calls from my former in-laws, who claimed my timing was inappropriate. That evening, Cassie called. Deciding to be civil, I answered in a monotone voice. "Hello. Jeff, it's me. I know, what do you want? You never let me explain what you think you saw in that photo. Go ahead." "It was taken out of context. We must have been spinning or something, and the photo just looks bad." "Right. I guess that makes me the villain. Oh, by the way, I didn't share the video. Let me replay it to check if your story holds up." Cassie paused. "There's no video." "No, but lying about it doesn't make things better. You've destroyed our future. I'm not raising kids with someone who can't stay faithful. We're done. Just give me a chance. You won't regret it. You couldn't stay faithful for 5 years. Why would I believe you'd make it to 20? Goodbye, Cassie." "I'll fight this divorce," she shouted. "Good luck," I replied. "Maybe you'll figure out how to fix yourself before marrying again." Cassie never followed through on her threat, though I later learned she had been demoted at work. A small victory that didn't fix anything but still felt satisfying. With Christmas approaching, I volunteered for every Santa event at local hospitals. Someone at the North Pole must have been looking out for me because I was called to fill in for another hospital event just days before Christmas. Interacting with sick children and their families filled me with renewed determination to have a family of my own someday. During lunch, I ran into Julie again, the kind nurse I'd met previously. "Santa, what brings you here? Did the reindeer misbehave?" "No, the kids found out about my past and told me to get a better job," I joked. Her laugh was disarming, and we spent the break chatting. When she noticed my missing wedding ring, I admitted I'd been divorced since April. "Maybe I should take you to dinner, and you can tell me all about it," she said with a wink. "Maybe you should," I replied. Julie's warmth made me realize there was hope for the future. By the time I left, I felt lighter, as though the weight of the past few months had finally started to lift. The doctor glanced at my leg and said, "It's bleeding a bit. Nurse Julie here is doing a good job of distracting you from the pain." "Well done, nurse," I quipped. Julie smirked. "No problem. He can't remember his last tetanus shot, so maybe we should make this one extra memorable." The doctor raised an eyebrow. "You two seem to know each other." Julie chuckled. "We met last Christmas. He was playing Santa." "That explains why Nurse Julie isn't her usual quiet and reserved self," the doctor remarked. "But let's stick to protocol. Clean the wound, give the shot, and I'll be back shortly with the suture kit." Once the doctor left, Julie administered the shot with practiced care. As she cleaned the wound, she asked casually, "So, where are you taking me?" "Somewhere I can show you off without worrying you'll run off with the competition." "Maybe the laundromat," I teased. "How about no?" she replied, pressing a little too firmly on the wound, making me wince. "Okay, fine," I said. "How about this? Meet me tomorrow at 7 p.m. at Jenny's pub. They've got amazing marinades." "You're making me drive myself?" she asked with mock indignation. "Well, I don't have your phone number or address." "Fair enough." "It's a date," she said, her smile completely disarming me. The doctor returned and had the stitches done in less than 10 minutes. As I got ready to leave, Julie called after me with a mischievous grin. "Don't be late, or your competitor nightmares might come true." The date at Jenny's pub. I arrived at Jenny's pub an hour early, my nerves jangling. It was the most anxious I'd been about a date since my divorce. My heart leaped when I saw a man holding the door open for Julie. He invited her to join him, but she brushed him off, scanning the room until her eyes landed on me. She looked stunning, clearly dressed to impress. I, on the other hand, felt underdressed. Standing, I waved her over, her warm smile easing my nerves. "Popular spot," she greeted me. "Well, I did say I wanted to show you off," I replied. "Looks like the wolf didn't waste any time trying to charm the fox." "Bet you're used to that." Julie laughed. "What can I get you to drink?" she asked. "White wine," she replied. Glancing at the floor, she added, "Judging by the peanut shells, you've been here a while." Couldn't risk being late. Someone told me that wouldn't go over well. Wow, a guy who listens. The noise in the pub wasn't overwhelming, and we enjoyed a lively conversation over dinner and drinks. When we grew tired of sitting at the table, I asked, "Feel like catching a movie or going dancing?" "Not really," Julie said. "I'm more interested in learning about you and your past. There's a quiet coffee shop near my apartment. I'll send you the address." "What's your number?" We exchanged cheek kisses as we left, and I looked up the coffee shop location. Fortunately, it wasn't far. Julie arrived a few minutes before me, clearly knowing the best parking spots. Getting to know each other. The coffee shop was cozy and quiet, perfect for another 2 hours of conversation. I learned that Julie was 3 years younger than me, wanted kids, and was focused on her career but realistic about taking a pause for motherhood. She was as reserved as I was, but when she opened up, her humor was delightful. She didn't pry into my failed marriage that night, but a month later, after several dates, she finally brought it up. Jeff, I know you like me, and I think you know I like you too. But before this gets serious, I need to know what happened in your first marriage. Taking a deep breath, I replied, Julie, I really care about you, so I'll be honest. This is my side of the story. You can verify it with anyone I mention. I explained everything. How I had secretly played Santa, how my ex-wife Cassie's company holiday party at the Five Seasons Hotel had exposed her infidelity, and how I had witnessed her inappropriate behavior with a coworker. Wow, what a sneaky move, Julie said when I finished recounting how I caught Cassie dancing provocatively with Pat Stillman. I nodded. That night, I realized I couldn't trust her, especially not with the future of any children we might have had. Filing for divorce was my only option. No counseling? No second chances? Julie asked. Nope. Kids are a 20-year commitment. She couldn't stay loyal for 5. Trust is everything, and once it's gone, there's no going back. Julie's expression was a mixture of empathy and thoughtfulness. Our conversation dragged a bit after that, but when we hugged and kissed goodbye, I felt a glimmer of hope. By the time we made our relationship official, several months had passed. After a romantic dinner and walk in the park, Julie invited me to her apartment. It was the first time I'd seen her dressed down, revealing her softer, more sensual side. That night, our bond deepened, solidifying the foundation of our relationship. The holiday season returns. As the next Christmas season approached, I asked Julie, "Got any plans for Saturday? I'm working a shift from 4 p.m. to midnight. Why? Want to be Santa's cute little helper?" Julie laughed. "Sure. Where are you playing Santa?" "At the Children's Hospital, your old workplace." Julie teased, "The kids might not appreciate my costume, but I bet you will." "And you'd be right," I replied with a grin. At the hospital, we worked seamlessly as a team, bringing smiles to the children and their families. As we left, dressed in regular clothes, Julie leaned close and said, "If I'm asked, I'm ready to sign a 25-year contract, or longer. Aren't you afraid I'll make a rash decision and toss you aside?" I joked. "No," she said confidently. "I talked to John Malden. He confirmed everything you told me. I admire your courage in standing by your convictions." At that moment, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. Turning to Julie, I took her hands and dropped to one knee. "Julie, will you marry me?" I asked, pretending to open an invisible ring box. "It would be an honor, sir," she said, slipping the imaginary ring onto her finger. "Looks like I guessed your size right." "Yes, size 5.5. It fits perfectly," she said with a sly smile. A few days later, I repeated my proposal with a real ring. From that moment, it felt like we were living in a magical fairy tale. We married, had 2 wonderful children with traditional names, and lived happily ever after. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story.